episode 2.5, Loud, Lucid, and Laughs, the presidency and other things. So welcome to another episode of Loud, Lucid, and Laughs. Remember, it's something about nothing and a little about everything. So we're in a very odd place right now. Oh, but first, our lawyers have me to say this. Everything you hear is our own opinions and not the opinions of any other entity. All right, moving on. Like I said, we're in a very odd place right now. And speaking of odd, as you can see, oh yeah, there we speaking of odd, what is this shirt?
Hard man to love, Doug.
Stephanie bought that, right?
No, well, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So
Kevin
folks,
Fowler,
we have Rich James here with us.
Kevin
So
Fowler, great country singer out of Texas, and but yes, I am a hard man to love. So yeah.
yeah. All right. Well, hey, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
So we had number 2 going, and now we're on 2.5 because we're gonna redo number 2 now that I get to have you involved because there is something I heard about you that you might have a few opinions on what we're gonna talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the presidency. Have we become a joke? Like as the United States as a whole, are we a joke right now, or I mean, there's several other countries that have kind of gone through some of the same stuff we've gone through in the last couple of elections. But it makes you wonder if people are looking at us going, what a joke, the United States. I hope that's not happening. So, Rich, I'm somewhat of a conspiracy. No, no,
Cheers.
I'm not. I'm not. No. Yeah, yeah. Okay, to an extent, I'm a conspiracy theorist, but seriously, there are still people out there that believe that Biden got 81 million votes.
81,
Not
81 million.
81 million. Now, not even Obama, who in 2008 earned 69 million votes in his presidential election, which was the highest at that time.
Obama was said to be the most popular president ever at 69 million, but the guy that stayed in the basement and
Ugh.
didn't campaign in front of more than 7 people got
Oh,
81 million votes. And now, Doug, I got to ask you a question
yeah.
because this is my first time on this podcast thing. I'm only seeing like half your face. Should you be in the middle a little bit more, or I'm just
Maybe you need to open your camera up bigger. I'm in the middle on mine.
okay? All right, that's good. That's all I need to know. Hey, I got to tell you something on that though, on the 81 million votes.
Yeah.
A lot of people have speculation. There's a lot of people that said, well, Trump was that hated, that people turned out and voted in hordes because, they didn't like this man. Trump, you could say, was a hard man to love.
It might still be.
Some people feel that way. Um,
Yeah.
Others don't. But the 81 million mathematically, I don't ever follow the science, but I do follow the math, and mathematically wasn't possible.
Well, and also if you look at a lot of the times when they were running against each other, and you see um, huge packed audiences for Trump, and
Mm-hmm.
then you see doctored photos or the way they took the shot, and then you see different angles from different news outlets that took pictures of Biden,
Yeah,
and they're
Trump's like Van Halen at their height when you go to that concert, and then like Biden was like some band from Canada that you never hear of. I don't
oh,
know. I can't even name a
okay.
band. I can't even name a band that
Well,
has 3 people that show up for it.
well,
So
when it comes down to it, I'm not saying that there was a. You know what? Okay, I'm not even going to go there. Seriously,
Dude, you
I'm
can
gonna.
say conspiracy theory. Don't be afraid to say it.
I'm. You know what? I'm going to leave that one in somebody
As
else's
far as
court.
I know, Doug, as far as I know, the conspiracy theorists are winning like 175 to 0 at the moment.
It would seem that way, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I'm going to leave that ball in everybody else's court. You play ball how you want. We are going to go back and dig into the Trump Biden stuff a little bit later, but I wanted to do this podcast about the presidency and controversy. And one of the big things we just started with was a lot of controversy. So it made me do a little research, Rich. And one of the big things I found was if you look back in history, there's about 8 other somewhat controversial elections. And I kind of wanted to bump through those a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
And let's get your take on some of those. So starting with the very first one, and this is new to me by doing the video recording like this, so it's taking up a little more space. So I got 2 computers up and going. I'm that gifted. And so I've got information over here on this one, and then I'm bringing up everything else on this one here in front of us. So number one, 1800. It was a while back, right?
A little bit ago.
So this election went down just as the nation's first political parties were taking shape. At the time, the electoral college process was far different than it was today. Each elector voted for 2 candidates. The one with the most votes became president. Now, here was a key thing I saw that I quite honestly wasn't aware of for all you history buffs. The runner up would become vice president. I was not aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah. The runner up.
So,
the guy who got the second amount of votes.
right. And it didn't matter, So, under this system, Thomas Jefferson had his vice president pick of Aaron Burr, who tied for first place 73 to 73. But due to a communication error in the Democratic Republican electors, or Burr-led conspiracy.
So
There's
that word. There's that word again. That word.
It's been around for a long time, right? So if you were to believe that way, Burr said it was a conspiracy that it turned out with the same amount of votes, whereas John Adams, who was a member of the rival party, the Federalist Party back then, he got 65 votes. So this was one of the only 2 times in history that the election went to the House of Representatives. And it just so happened that Alexander Hamilton, who was the first Treasury Secretary, lobbied all the people that he could. He went after the Federalists, got all them Adams people to throw their support behind our boy.
Are you saying the good old boy network was at work here?
The good old boy network, the very first good old boy network here, possibly. So they all threw their support behind Thomas Jefferson. Side note here that I got to tell you that I'm reading here is that Burr, would later have a duel with Hamilton, the guy that took the position from him, and he would kill him in 3 years.
That was like a gun duel. Boom, boom.
Yeah, like exactly.
Walking off 3 paces, and then they shot him with an AR, right? It was an AR rifle, right? I mean,
no.
No.
I mean, not in 1800.
I mean, I think everything's an AR rifle that they use these days. I mean, like all the time, anybody would say. Sorry.
You mean it? What you mean is an assault rifle?
Well, is that what that means?
Yeah, AR stands for assault rifle. How many people freak out over that one?
Right,
folks. Okay, listen. We know that AR does not stand for assault rifle.
Does not.
We'll get into one of those podcasts later. Exactly. Create a little more controversy.
Remind me, I'll put my Second Amendment flag right behind it.
All right, so moving on to number two, 1824, and I'm going to try and roll through a few of these pretty quick. So the Federalist Party had dissolved at this point, and the four candidates were all of the Democratic / Republican Party. Old Hickory, Mr. Andrew Jackson.
Love that guy. I mean,
And
no, I'm just kidding.
yeah, I mean,
I used to live by Andrew Jackson's place, Doug. I don't know if you do this, but
down Hermitage.
in Hermitage, Tennessee. When I moved to Tennessee, I was living in Hermitage to begin with, and I would have people ask me, "Where at in Tennessee did you go?" And I'd be like, "Hermitage, Tennessee. You might have heard of it. Andrew Jackson's place is there. His whole plantation's there." And I don't. Can I say plantation? I don't know. But his his home's there, and I would tell people, "Hey, Hermitage, Tennessee. If it was good enough for Andrew Jackson, it's good enough for me."
So, out of the four people, nobody got a majority of the votes. So, once again, for the only second time, the vote went to the House. Now, they eliminated Clay because he had the least amount of votes, so it left it down to three. After a month of backroom negotiations, good old boy talk again.
Good old boy talk, yeah.
Clay supporters threw all their weight behind Adams, enabling him to win the House vote and cast the most of their electoral votes for Jackson. It all now turned in favor of Adams. So when Adams chose Clay as the Secretary of State soon after the inauguration, guess what happened? Jackson got a little bit irritated. He got enraged and called it corrupt.
Don't want to enrage old Hickory, you know.
There was a conspiracy again.
Conspiracy
theory. You can't make this up. This is history. Number 3, Mr. Abraham Lincoln. Election of 1860 wasn't just contentious, it tore the nation apart. Abraham Lincoln was the chosen nominee for the fledgling Republican Party. He was a steadfast opponent of slavery, while the Democratic Party went with Lincoln's Illinois rival, Senator Stephen Douglas. If you've ever visited Illinois, you can see them in all different places.
The Lincoln and Douglas debates.
The Lincoln and Douglas debates, right. So Lincoln won 40% of the popular vote, but took most of the electoral votes in the North, along with California and Oregon. And just weeks after Lincoln's victory, South Carolina voted to succeed. 6 more states followed, forming the Confederate States of America in February 1861 with Jefferson Davis as their president. A little bit of conspiracy there. Huge one, right? I mean, contentious because it literally split the nation. So moving on to 1876. This one was a doozy. Democratic Governor Samuel Tilden of New York won 250,000 more ballots in the popular vote than his Republican opponent, Rutherford B. Hayes. And he snagged 19 more electoral votes. Tilden was still 1 electoral vote shy, requiring the majority at the time of 185, and just 20 votes remained uncounted. Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina remained too close to call, as each party accused the other of fraud, while in Oregon an elector was declared illegal and replaced with controversial results. Conspiracy theory?
What's the number of conspiracy theories we're on now here?
Well, so far...
Started 1800. We're
1800. So far, we're on number 4, and every one of them had some type of conspiracy going on.
In some backroom conversations.
Yeah, a lot of backroom conversations, and a lot of people throwing their weight around, getting votes from other people to go for somebody else. So in 1912, number 5, Mr. Theodore Roosevelt. He found himself drawn back into politics as the 1912 election approached. After his close friend and hand-picked successor, William Howard Taft, angered Roosevelt and fellow progressives by siding increasingly with the conservative wing of the Republican Party. Roosevelt challenged Taft in the primaries. In the end, Roosevelt and Taft split the Republican vote, helping Woodrow Wilson, the Democrat, win the White House, despite the fact that he captured less than 50% majority in many states. Conspiracy? Controversial?
Now, Doug, at that point in time, were they still doing whoever got the second most votes was the vice president?
No, and from what I am seeing, that things had changed by then.
Right.
Because they were no longer the Democrat/Republican Party. It was now two separate parties. Which brings us on to number 6, 1948. And I'm sure everybody can, if you saw this picture, you would remember what happened. There was a gentleman holding up a newspaper, and that newspaper said, Dewey defeats Truman.
Truman, our guy.
President Harry S. Truman, he was on his way out. In the midterm elections of 46, both houses in Congress had gone to Republican for the first time in 20 years.
Doug, I do want to say that Truman was absolutely the best president that ever came out of Missouri, that ever won in Missouri.
Okay.
Missouri president.
You threw that little slash in there on the end of Missouri, because I was getting ready to say, now wait, because come farther along here, Rich, we got a lot of different stuff going on.
All right.
So, Thomas Dewey was a strong candidate, having lost a close race to Franklin Roosevelt in 44. Truman's biggest struggle was opposition within his own party. His Commerce Secretary quit to run against him on a progressive ticket.
I do have to say, though, with the Truman-Dewey thing, I do want to add that it kind of reminded me of just a little bit of 2016, when they were already printing the papers that Hillary Clinton won, and instead Trump held up the paper.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. And of course, Truman went on to win. And one of the first pictures taken was him holding the paper up saying Dewey has defeated Truman. So next we would have in 2000. Sound familiar? 2000?
2000. I remember that one.
It would be a gentleman named George W. Bush and another gentleman named Al Gore in a small little state called Florida.
I like to call him Al Tree Loving. I'm sorry, but
Mr. Climate Control
I love
himself,
trees as well.
the inventor of the internet. You know, pick your favorite.
The guy that wants to save, go green and save the world and not use electricity. And he has one of the largest houses in Tennessee. So.
Yeah. And probably flies a lot of first class or,
imagine,
Learjets or whatever have you. That's a whole nother podcast in its own self right there. Rich.
Oh yeah.
So a few hundred votes separated both candidates in Florida. Excuse me. I'm trying to get over a little bit of a sore throat.
What do you got in that glass, Doug, is what I want to know.
That there is green tea.
Oh, okay.
Good for the soul.
Staying off the bourbon tonight, then I see.
So. I don't drink bourbon.
Okay.
So, lawsuits began to fly back and forth. And after 5 agonizing weeks after the election, the Supreme Court finally had the final word. And of course, we know who that went to. Bush won. So you were speaking of this a little earlier, Rich. And we're going to bring it up again.
Out somewhere.
Yeah, that's when the name Chad became a bad name to have, right?
Right. So,
2016. So now we're in number 8 right now.
Great.
So we started in 1800. Number 8 brings us up to
we got there
2016.
I like it.
Bush and Gore may have been the first time in modern history a president was elected despite losing the popular vote, but it was not the last. In 2016, businessman and reality TV show host Donald Trump defeated former First Lady, Senator, and Secretary of State Donald J. Hillary Rodham Clinton, even though she received 3 million more votes than him in the popular vote. Conspiracy theory? Controversial? Yeah, could have been. So that's 8 somewhat controversial elections, Rich, which brings us up to where we currently are. So, with all that, with controversies,
that took us up to 2016, right?
Right.
And we're in 2020 now. 2020
yeah.
I mean, we're in 2024, but do we have a 2020 controversy? That's not on there.
That's not on there.
Is that the article we're going to write right now, or?
I mean, we could be. I mean, it might be going that way. I don't know. It depends on where you take it, I guess. It's the guy giving an unbiased opinion here. We're trying to, anyway. So
I would have to say 2020 was also another controversial. We had an incumbent president who garnered 11 more million votes, never been done before by an incumbent president. And then we had the guy that sat in his basement who did what you talked about earlier, got 81 million votes and went, crazy. And, where I said, he couldn't get 7 people to show up at a rally or, a talk that he was doing, but he got 81 million votes.
Okay, well, that could be maybe number 9 that you're going to talk about, because you know what our next little 2 here is, talking on presidents, is who is the worst president or who was the worst president. Now, first off, it's a personal decision, because you could look at a lot of different things and there'd be a lot of different people say. But Rich, I did some research on this and I looked at a lot of different polls, and almost all of them led to Mr. James Buchanan
as the worst president?
As the worst president in almost every single one. So,
yeah, there's a lot of different arguments on that.
So
remember what? Do you remember who Dad used to, call the worst president ever? Didn't like.
would that have been Carter?
What's that?
Was that Carter?
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
Man, he did not like him, did he?
Yeah, he did not like him. But it was funny. I had a client on my table the other day, and I was asking him who he thought was the greatest president in his generation in time.
We're going to get to that.
He said Jimmy Carter. So,
really?
it's all, I guess it's all on who you ask.
Yeah, it's who you ask and who you poll and what your opinion is. And we'll dig. Looking at worst presidents, of course, like I said, I looked at all these different polls, and all of them pointed to Mr. Buchanan. And histories condemn him for not forestalling the succession of southern states or addressing the issue of slavery, is what most of them held a consistent thing. And they ranked him literally most often as worst president. I think there was maybe 2 different polls I saw where he was ranked number 2 instead of number 1 as the worst. Well, now, if you look at U.S. What?
Well, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so I've got this U.S. News article that lists the 10 worst. And again, these are opinions. And literally, you can check several different news pages, and you're going to find different ones from everybody. Number 10, I'm going to blaze through these. You stop me if you find anything fascinating or you want to talk about
10.
It.
Are you going to go from like 10 to 1 on like who's the worst to the
number
best?
Number 10. Yep.
Okay.
Number 10 down to 1.
And then
So number
one would
10,
be the
Zachary
worst stuff.
Taylor.
One would be the absolute
One,
worst president we've had, they're saying. Okay.
you got it.
All right.
So number ten is Zachary Taylor. His brief presidency came to an end in the 1880s when he fell ill after celebrating a 4th of July holiday. Another side note, becoming one of 8 presidents to die in office. Number 9. If my webpage will cooperate. Would have Herbert Hoover. He was known as the poorest communicator. And he also
Well,
was one of those guys
he's
that
not
fueled
known
the
as the
trade
worst
war.
communicator anymore, Doug.
Yeah.
We obviously have somebody winning in that.
Oh boy. Look, he fueled a bunch of trade wars, and he also caused the big pump to the Great Depression. So he was brought in at number 9. Number 8, Millard Fillmore. He backed the Compromise of 1850. That delayed the Southern secession by allowing slavery to spread. So he's brought in as number 8. And by the way, prior to the adoption of the 25th Amendment, you know what that is, right?
Absolutely.
Which came into play in 67. When a vice president replaced a sitting president, the vice presidency was left vacant back then. Number 7, Rich. John Tyler. He was a defender of slavery and abandoned his party's platform once he became president.
I don't know much about John.
Yeah, I don't either. Number 6, Warren G. Harding. He was an avid golfer. We hear a lot about that in the last 4 presidencies, haven't we?
Right.
He
brings up an interesting thing, Doug, that I saw yesterday. I got to just
yeah.
throw this in here real quick. Yesterday I saw a picture that Donald J. Trump had put up of himself, where the media had put up a picture of him with this big belly coming out and him swinging and him playing golf, but it showed him super fat. And then he put up 3 pictures right next to it of him playing golf yesterday, which the man does love to play golf. So there's no question that those were real pictures. And he came out and said that the picture that the media put up was AI.
Oh,
And
that's a
it was
scary thing
not a real
about
picture.
AI.
And the fact that he put up 3 pictures of himself playing, and we know it's him, I kind of believe what he's saying on this one.
And that is a scary thing with AI, and that would definitely be another podcast. I need to be writing these down, don't I?
Hey, Doug, let's think about this for a minute. Back to 1800, 1900, 1950, all the way back to 2000. We didn't have a lot of, we weren't taking pictures on cell phones. We weren't, there wasn't the media like it is today out there, readily usable, handleable, I thank God there wasn't cell phones when I was in high school, because I mean,
dude, I was.
Hey, I wouldn't be able to run for president because of any of those pictures are out. But
I was in 1991. I was working in Circuit City when we had the first phones come out.
Yeah.
And I bought a bag phone, and I felt like I was going to war every time I walked out the door or got back in my car.
Yeah, I had a Motorola Flip in 96. Ryan, my son, was born in 95. I think a year after his birth, or somewhere there, a year and a half to. I had a Motorola Flip, and that was but I was just talking about this today.
It had the little skinny antenna.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it had the little skinny antenna that you easily break, but you felt cool with the flip, and boom,
yeah,
And but I can tell you this, I don't even remember. You might remember this better than me. I was talking to another client today, and I was talking about texting, and it just came up, and I was like, oh, I was texting this person in 2004, blah blah blah. I think that was the first time. I don't even know I don't even know if it was 2004, 2005. I think that's the first time I remember like receiving a text on my phone, which was another flip phone, by the way. But
Text. You know,
I didn't look that up.
I'm gonna
Are
do
you looking it up?
When was the first
Text
message sent? December 3rd, 1992. It simply said Merry Christmas. Neil Papworth, who sent the world's first text message on December 3rd, 1992.
It wasn't a common thing at that point, though.
No, because it wasn't until a year later that Nokia was the first person to introduce an SMS feature.
Right.
But back then, you had to pay for everything. Unless you did on nights or weekends.
So anyway,
all right.
Back to this list.
So,
I just wanted to say thank the good Lord above that we didn't have cell phones in the 90s or 80s
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So number 5 is Mr. William Henry Harrison, who gave the longest inaugural address ever in U.S. history, and then came down with pneumonia that made his 30-day presidency the shortest in U.S. history. Probably should have cut that speech a little bit shorter.
That's a little unfair. The guy didn't have a lot of time.
Yeah, well, he was the first president to ever die in office, by the way.
Yeah.
So we move on to...
I do want to say we should give him a pass, though, because, like,
right.
3 years later, if you would have lived, you might have been the greatest president ever.
Well, maybe he should have cut that address a little bit shorter.
Yeah.
Just saying. So number 4, Franklin Pierce. Pierce is favor for expanding the borders, thereby adding several slave states, helped set the stage for the Civil War. These guys. All right, so here's where we run into some controversy again. You can call it whatever you want. And like I said, you can look at several different ones and your own. This came from usnews.com. So they having a third, they have a two-way tie for number 2. So we have 2 number 2s, and then we go to number 1. So we got a little controversy going on here.
Two-way tie.
Two-way tie. Andrew Johnson. He survived impeachment after opposing Reconstruction initiatives, including the 14th Amendment. So he came in as number 2 as a tie. As a tie. Now, I don't know if you're ready for this next one. Second number 2 as a tie, Donald Trump. The only living president among the 10 worst presidents in history, Trump is also the only president to be impeached twice. Despite the swirling legal troubles around him, including criminal charges surrounding his efforts to overturn the 2020 election results, he is running again in 2024. He will be the only second president to ever serve non-consecutive terms if he does get elected. So before I move to number 1, is there anything you wanted to throw in there?
Doug, I was sitting in a restaurant the other day. We were up in Breckenridge, Colorado. And I had this guy, him and his son, me and Steph were there, him and his son, and he's like, guys, like, after talking to me for a few minutes, he's like, oh, you know what? You sound like a Trump supporter. And I said, yeah, I do. And he said, yeah. He goes, I hate Trump. I would never vote for him. And I was like, well, why? Why would you never vote for him? And the guy was like, well, because of the resurrection. The resurrection.
You lost me at that one. I'm confused.
Yeah, he said resurrection, and I was like, do you mean the insurrection? And he's like, yeah. And I said, well, it wasn't really an insurrection, and he's already, he was acquitted of that. He's not been tried for an insurrection, even though the Democratic Party wants to keep bringing up J6 and throwing that out there and saying all that. And then after I said that, the guy's son just stood up, walked out, and stormed off, and guy paid his bill and took off. You know, and
Didn't want to have a conversation.
Didn't want to have a conversation. That's my only point of that whole story. Was like some of these people are so, we call it, the Trump deranged syndrome. And some of these people are so, dead set against that they don't want to have a conversation at all. And I feel like we need to have a conversation. It's like one other thing I want to say on that, and I think Trump came out today and said it. Now, look, don't get me wrong. I am one of those guys that anytime I've ever heard Trump speak, I'm asking myself, will somebody write his speeches? Can Rich James write the speeches for Donald Trump? Can I do
it? Yeah.
And he came out today, and this is a valid question. He's asking, with this persecution and all these indictments that have come out in the last months for him, and all the stuff they're trying to do to avoid him running again, and you realize this, Doug, they could have done this the day Biden took office. They could have done it 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
If they wanted to interfere, but if they wanted to, if he did something wrong, I'm saying, and I'm not saying he didn't do anything wrong, but if he really did something wrong, why didn't they do this back then? Back 3 years ago, or when it happened, instead they're bringing all this up, and as he would say, and the Trump fans would say, it's election interference, and there's no doubt about it not being election interference. So, the question is, with that number 2 rating, I would love to ask the people that wrote that article, tell me in Trump's presidency what he did that puts him at the second worst president of all time.
Mean tweets.
Mean tweets.
So what? Huh? What? So
I know people are going to be like, well, there's the E. Jean Carroll thing. There's all this other stuff. Yeah, well, this lady is a lady that's a lunatic that can't even remember what exactly happened, when it happened, how it happened. And we've just got these obscene dollar amounts that are being thrown out there. You got the 355, 60 million, whatever that he's supposed to, because he borrowed money, paid it off,
and not only that,
it gave people jobs in New York, and the bank gave him a loan. He paid it off with interest and gave thousands of jobs out there. And they're holding him accountable. Okay.
I'm gonna interrupt you for a second. 2 things.
Okay.
The Carol thing. Did you see the video she did and what she said when?
It's sad, dude. It's sad.
The decision came in and how she was going to spend the money.
Yes.
I'm going to buy everybody something I'm going to buy my lawyer all new clothes. And her lawyer, you could just see the cringe-worthy effect in her lawyer.
Oh, I know.
Like,
so they awarded her $5 million in the first case. And then just because Trump came out and still said, I didn't do this.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Then they give her another $83 million. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's ridiculous. It's numbers that are out there that would never be put on anybody else. And that's when you start seeing that kind of stuff, you're kind of like, really?
Number two thing is the Trump and the Mar-a-Lago, what it's worth, all that jazz.
Yeah. So I just saw, hey,
the bank came out and said, we gave the guy a loan, he paid the loan back, we don't want to file anything. And the state has decided to pick it up with nobody wanting anything done and go after the guy. Now listen, I gotta tell you this. Years ago, I bought a house for $60K. I needed to get some things done, so I approached the bank. When I bought the house was worth $65. I got it for $60. I had done nothing to the house, and I said, hey, I want to do some things to my house. I need to fix a few things. So the bank comes to me and says, okay, guy comes out to appraise the house. Well, how much are you needing? I said, well, I gotta have it, I gotta get about 10 grand. So the guy appraises the house for 10 grand more. So he appraises it for 75. I go to the bank, I get my money. Now it came along that my heating and cooling system went out. So I went back to the bank and I needed more money. So the guy comes look at the house, says, well, what do you need it appraised for? Now, mind you, my heating system is gone at this point. And we'd been in the house for a while, so it was worn and torn. I need to get 88K, man. Okay, done. And they gave me the money. I didn't I didn't tell them I needed it. I didn't blow up some weird portion and say it was worth that much.
Yeah.
They just figured out what I needed and
Well,
kept moving the money up.
that's the thing. Exactly. I mean, if anybody, you could start just arresting tons and tons of people that have gotten money loans. I saw a house yesterday that was put up in Florida, and it's got 20 something thousand square feet, and they're asking 295 million. Mar-a-Lago, that they said was only worth 18 million, has 60,000 square feet. So it is on the ocean.
Listen,
And I mean,
the house I'm in right now got 3 different appraisals from 3 different companies.
yeah.
The company that I have my loan through, they send me an update every month. Right now, they're putting it this amount. I use a couple apps on my phone that also keep track of what my car's worth, house worth, and all that. This one app says it's worth this much. Then Gina and I have a friend who is getting into the home business, and she asked if she could do an assessment on her house, and I said sure. So she ran an assessment on her house. It came back. Okay, wait. I better come down where you can actually see it. Here, that's 3 different, and they're huge, man. The gaps are huge.
Yeah.
So you can't. I don't think you can even take somebody to court for that, especially if the bank doesn't want to sue them. But anyway, getting back to our original course from the beginning.
Yes.
So back when the Democrats were running in 2020, well, I'm going a little different here. Back when the Democrats were running in 2020 to get the nomination, there were 27, Rich, 27 different candidates, and this is what gets me, man. Because I'm gonna open this site and I want to go through this real quick. We're running out of time here, so I want to blaze through this.
Okay.
Michael Bennet, Bill de Blasio, Joe Biden, Cory Booker, Steve Bullock, Pete Buttigieg, Julian Castro, John Delaney, Mike Gravel, Brand, Amy Klobuchar, and I might just totally have butchered that. John Hickenlooper, Tulsi Gabbard, Kamala Harris, Kate Inslee, Wayne Messam, Beto O'Rourke, Tim Ryan, Bernie Sanders, Joe Sestek, Eric Swallow, Elizabeth Warren, part Indian by the way, Marianne Williamson, Andrew Yang, Deval Patrick, Tom Steyer, Michael Bloomberg. 27 different nominations, right? Now here's what I got to ask you, Rich. The Democratic Party considers themselves the diversity party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In 2020, they had 27 different candidates. Now explain to me. I need somebody that is smarter than I am to help me with this.
Oh,
How is it? How is it that the party of diversity that had 27 different candidates, and if you go look those people up, you had several different races, women, men. I mean, you reached across the whole spectrum.
No,
And guess what?
you had several different races, um, and several different. You had all kinds of diversity in that list that you just named off. And the guy that was pretty much winning at the beginning was the gay mayor Pete Buttigieg, who's the transportation guy. But so
Well, he got something out of it
you had
anyway.
you had African Americans, you had gay people, you had Elizabeth Warren, the Indian. I mean, you had a lot. You're right. You had a lot of diversity,
Yeah,
and I'll tell you this: the reason they picked the guy that they did was because, as you know, so Biden wasn't doing anything until South Carolina. You know, in that
dude.
in that primary bid,
My
and then
point
he
is, they went
won.
with the old white guy.
What's that?
My point is, they went with the old white guy.
Right, right. And they went with it because you know what you were talking about earlier. The good old boy network got together on the Sunday before Super Tuesday, and Obama made phone calls and said, "Hey, you got to drop out. You got to drop out. You need to drop out." They even made Pete Buttigieg, who was winning at that point, drop out, and it was ridiculous for him to drop out at that point because he was in it. The guy was
So,
in it. Um,
and this is where I got to go with this one.
but I tell
Shouldn't
you
we
who
have
wasn't
an
in
out
it,
date
Vince,
label?
was the vice president of the United States right now, Kamala Harris. She was only garnering like 1% of the general population. So she should not have been the pick as vice president if we'd have been back in 1800.
No, you're right. But I mean, shouldn't we have an out of date label somewhere? I mean, I know you got to be minimum of 35 to run, and Teddy Roosevelt was our youngest president at 42, but he kind of got pushed into the role when the president before him was assassinated. Our oldest president to date is Biden, 78 years old, over 81 by the time 2024 hits to get reelected. I mean, do you really want Kamala Harris replacing him? Amendment
Oh, wait.
25 I talked about earlier.
Am I
Anyone?
shaking my head out loud?
Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, yeah, you are.
Sorry.
I mean, the, dude, this guy's going to be what, 84, 85 at the end
Yeah,
if he runs again and makes it?
he's not.
This is a guy that just got a pass, Rich, about documents from his vice president days because he can't remember anything. So special counsel Herr declined to prosecute President Joe Biden for his handling of documents, but said in a report released last week that Biden presents serious risks to national security. And he added he wouldn't charge Biden with the president that he was president because he could portray himself as an elderly man with poor memory.
Yeah,
And a jury would be very sympathetic to him.
I'm going to use that excuse for the next time I do anything wrong. I'm too
Herr's
old.
words here. Robert Herr's words. Our investigation uncovered evidence that President Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen, but added it does not establish that Mr. Biden was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt
Hmm,
because they feel like they can't try him.
because he's too old.
And and then you got Trump, who's currently 77. So if he was to get reelected, he's going to be what, 81 when he's done?
Yeah.
And then a somewhat controversial thing, and you and I talked about this off camera about the Nikki Haley thing. You know, the lady that loses to none of the above, who's running against Trump right now.
And she's losing in her
So
home state by like 80 points.
yeah, yeah, which is coming up, South Carolina.
Saturday,
I mean,
24th.
okay, I don't. I mean, I'm not against Trump, but the guy's had a lot of issues. And I look back and I question a few things that he did when he was president. He said Mexico was going to pay for the border. And guess what? Our taxes paid for it. He claimed he would drain the swamp when he got in there. And I honestly, I think he got in there and he realized that the swamp wasn't just Democrats, that it was Republicans too. Because since I can remember, the first president that ever came in and both sides hated him. That he had
Because
the
you know why, Doug?
Republicans.
You know
Why?
why? He wasn't a part of the good old boy network.
There you go. So, I mean, when both parties don't like you, bam,
Boom.
something's wrong. So, do you really think if he gets it again that he would accomplish much for the next 4 years? I mean, we could do this as its own podcast, to be honest.
Yeah, you know, here's my thing. You know, like we said, you know, with Biden, came out the next day, you know, they asked me about my son Bo, and apparently he couldn't even remember in the article, like, I mean, this is just what I've read, that he couldn't remember, like, when he was vice president.
Yeah, and they're trying to get that. They're trying to get those
old.
released.
He's too old. Did I vote for Trump before? Yeah. Is Trump too old? Probably. But I feel like he can still put together coherent speeches or coherent talks. Sometimes I feel like I said before, I feel like I want to write a speech for him. But
It's huge. It's huge, dude. Make a
Biden,
huge speech.
If Biden wasn't too old, all I needed him to do was come out the next day and put together 3 sentences, 4 or 5 sentences, maybe. I don't and agree with me on this one, Doug. All I wanted him to do was come out the next day and say, "Hi, I'm Joe Biden. I'm the President of the United States of America." And after Robert Hur's report, I read it last night, and I want to tell you that I feel like I'm very coherent. I'm very wise. I am, you know, my age is what it is. But, you know, just tell me something that made sense that, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what it has to be, but just tell me something that makes sense. And
Come on, man.
And he couldn't do that.
Come on, man.
He couldn't do that. Doug, we talked about
Come
the border.
on.
We talked about the border. I got to tell you, I read this today. This is pretty funny, I thought. If you live in a country where you can be arrested for fishing without a license, but not for entering that country illegally, it's safe to say that the country is run by idiots. You know, it is sad. It's very sad.
Which brings me to my point, Rich, that no one in the government is there to help you right now. Prove me wrong. What is that? What's that guy? Crowder guy? Prove me wrong.
Louder with Crowder.
Contrary to popular opinion, if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're wrong at this point. I mean it.
Hey, we can end it on this if you want. 435 House members, right?
Right.
There's 100 people in the Senate. You have a vice president. I think she's there somewhere. And you have a president, which we hope he's there somewhere. I don't know. But that's what is that, Doug? That's 537 people?
Yeah.
Here's where I'm getting a little loud. You know, this is loud, laughs, and loose. But, and we did say, out of the 3 brothers, I was the loud one. You were the laughing guy, and that other guy that's not.
That other guy that won't ever show up is the Lucid.
Maybe we can get him for one. But let me go back. 435 House members, 100 people in the Senate, a vice president and a president. That's 537. I say we wipe the slate, get rid of the whole 537, and start all over again.
I'm good with that.
Now I might get the FBI knocking on my door here in a minute, and I just want you to know, Rich James did not kill himself.
And folks, on that, we're going to call this one an end. And this will be episode 2.5, the remake. And I want to thank you, Rich. I know you're a hard man to love. I want to thank you for doing this with me, and hopefully this is the start of doing several of these together. And we'll try and get this one up in a few days and go from there. So I want to thank you all that tune in and listen. Went a little over an hour here. I was going to try and keep them around 30 to 45 minutes, but, you know, Rich is long-winded. So, no, I mean, it was both of us. It was really good. We got into some interesting stuff. And we'll probably pull a couple more podcasts out of this one.
And if you can't listen to the whole hour all at once, listen to like half and then the other half.
There you go. Do like I do with podcasts. Jump in your car on a long drive and turn us on, because we'll be up on Spotify. We'll have this loaded up on Facebook. We'll put this up to Twitter. And if Instagram will let me, it's been causing me some issues. We'll try to get it up there also. So thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time on Loud, Lucid, and Laughs.